Ladies and gentlemen, we have the distinct honor, and I am using that word pun intended, to welcome right now the former owner of Ring of Honor from 2004 to 2011, the current ROH ambassador and host of a damn good podcast, Last Stop Penn Station with Ian Riccaboni, the legendary Cary Silkin. Cary, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. How you guys doing?
We're doing great. We are trying our best to survive. We have not allowed to have any fun right now. We're completely locked down. So this is the highlight of, this is a huge highlight for us right now to get to do this with you.
You know what? And I'm going to pat ourselves in the back because we're batting 100 right now. For our ROH 19th anniversary special, we got Ian Riccaboni on this show. And now for our ROH 500th show special, we get Cary Silkin. I don't think any other podcast is doing as good as we are right now.
Well, if you're batting 100, that means you get one hit and 10 at bats. You're batting
it shows how much baseball I watch.
Yeah, we're the hockey country over here, right?
It's all right.
Well, let's get right into it. Let's talk about the 500th episode of Ring of Honor, and it's only fitting that it's being headlined by Jay and Mark Briscoe. So, Cary, I want to ask you right off the bat, how important is Jay and Mark to the history of Ring of Honor and the loyalty that they've shown to the company?
I mean, at the very first Ring of Honor show, Jay was on it. Mark was too young because it was in Philadelphia. This is before I was involved, but it was in Philadelphia, and the commission, you had to be 18. So Mark wasn't old enough to be to wrestle. So, but to your question, I'm sorry, I got to give you a baseball reference. These were the Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle of Ring of Honor, or whoever you want. I'll give you a hockey reference: the Gordie Howe and Bobby Orr.
There you go. The Wayne Gretzky's, if you will, right? They're the pioneers. I think Jay was in the very first match in company history, so I think it's only fitting that he main events with his brother. And they've had some great battles over the years as well.
Yeah. A couple times they've wrestled each other. Obviously, they're like 11, 12-time tag team champions. Mm-hmm. But I remember them wrestling each other in London.
Yeah, great match.
Our first trip to the UK, and a couple other times over the years. I'm not good. I could tell you dates from like the 70s and going to the Garden in the 80s or 60s or rock concerts,
Yeah.
But, as far as specific Ring of Honor stuff, you guys probably know better than I do.
Yeah,
we had Bill Apter on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he basically said the same thing. He says, you ask me a date, and I can't tell you anything. You ask me a story, and I'll be able to tell you.
Well, you're young men. It's easy to remember things. You'll find, even now, if you're 30, you'll remember things from when you're 10 or 11.
Yeah.
But if you ask what you ate for breakfast 2 days ago, forget it.
Oh, it's so true. Mike, I want to throw it to you for a question, but before I do that, Cary, you kind of touched on something about the history of the business, and you can remember things from back in the day, and it kind of falls into what I want to talk about next is, what are some of your earliest memories of professional wrestling, and what made you fall in love with it?
Oh, man, you're going to make me, I'm old, but you're going to make me really sound old. Started watching wrestling 1966, boys. I was 10, and my cousin turned me on to it. He's like 4 years older than me. He also turned me on to good music later on. But anyway, as far as wrestling used to be on. I lived in New Jersey, near New York City, so it was on TV 2 hours on Saturday nights on Channel 5. It was WWF. This is pre-UHF, pre-VHS, pre-internet, pre-cable. So the wrestling you got on TV, that was it. So if you lived in Toronto, you got the Toronto wrestling. But then in the early 70s, the UHF stations started. And in my area, it was like a miracle. they started showing championship wrestling from Florida.
Oh, nice.
And I used to be a magazine fan.
Mm-hmm.
So I would rush, when I discovered them, I would rush to get the magazines. So they started showing the Florida wrestling, as well as 2 hours of Lucha Libre de Los Angeles. It was the LA promotion from the Olympic Auditorium.
Is that Fred Blassie's area? Is that Fred Blassie's time frame?
Yes. And it was in Spanish. So we had LA, Florida, and New York. So these people I would read about in the magazines, I was getting to see them. And when I was old enough, my dad took me to the Garden. Little did I know, Vince McMahon was like a silent member of the NWA. So he would bring in these guys. He'd bring in Eddie Graham. He'd bring in Dory Funk Sr. and Terry Funk. He'd bring in Jack Briscoe. He'd bring in Harley Race. He'd bring in whomever, Vern Gagne. So, and they were not featured because nobody knew who they were unless you were a magazine freak. So they just wanted to come to New York and, chill out. So, but being a magazine guy, I'm like, holy shit, Harley Race is on the show. Or, whomever it was, fill in the blank. So I fell in love with wrestling right off the bat. It was totally uncool, even at 10, 11, right? So by the time I was like 16, 17, going to see Led Zeppelin, going to see the Stones, going to see Pink Floyd, I would have to drag people to come to wrestling.
Yeah.
Because it was so uncool to be wrestling.
Yeah.
But I loved it.
Well, it sounds like that your taste in music is just as good as your taste in wrestling too, Cary. Those are some big names you're throwing out.
Well, I was hoping you guys weren't like Cardi B and
No, give me the Beatles and the Stones, and we're Canadian, so we love our Tragically Hip.
Yeah, we live in the land of the
hip. See, I got David Bowie behind me.
That's right.
Doing the kayfabe.
So, Cary, let's. If we're going to talk about history, I want to talk about a little of your history and your contributions to not only Ring of Honor, but in the big span professional wrestling. You are considered the innovator behind the IPPV concept, especially with
the ones that didn't work. But go ahead.
In hindsight, but I don't. You were still the man. I don't think we have IPPV the way that we know it without Cary Silkin and without respect is earned. Where did you get the idea for this?
Before the internet pay-per-views, there were the ones we did in 2006, 7, 8 that were on in demand, and I don't know where in Canada they would have been, but they were pre-recorded. There was a guy named Ken Gelman. His company was called G-Funk. So we did it ass backwards. We recorded a show. This is back, like, let's say 2007. We got Danielson and Nigel and Jimmy Jacobs and Tyler Black and whomever, Briscoes, so on and so forth. And they weren't running until 6 weeks later. And then the HD net deal came along, which we didn't realize at the time. They didn't have a lot of exposure, meaning they were on very few outlets. And then we got into this internet pay-per-view stuff, the Go Fight Live and all that.
Right.
And often they didn't work right. But when they worked, it was good.
Well, I seriously think we don't get things like the Fight TV app and stuff like that. I like a lot of these new companies, I think, took what you did 10 years ago plus and ran with it. Did this just kind of come to you overnight kind of thing, or was this a?
Well, I didn't invent the pay-per-view itself.
No, of course not.
We were just a platform for them to show.
Right.
So, the aforementioned pre-recorded pay-per-views or the Go Fight Lives, those companies existed.
Okay.
And we were just another item for them to put on. So I'm not going to take credit for, these pay-per-views. I mean, I take credit for the product,
of course,
but that's where it's at.
All right, go ahead, Tyler. I'm sure you got a couple more.
Yeah, so Cary, Ring of Honor just celebrated its 19th birthday recently, which means it's old enough to drink here in Toronto. What are
barely legal?
Yeah, that's right. Looking back over time, what are some of your personal favorite moments with your time with Ring of Honor? Whether it's behind the scenes or something that happened in front of the camera, just what are some of your favorite memories looking back?
There's so many. Well, first of all, just the idea that we've outlived Nitro, or at the moment we've outlived Impact, TNA, whatever, or we're fighting with them. But as far as personal highlights, the Samoa Joe Kobashi match.
Wow, yeah.
At the Manhattan Center.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Madison Square Garden.
That's a big deal.
In 2019. Getting to go to the UK twice. Getting to work with Pro Wrestling Noah. And we worked with Dragon Gate too, but Pro Wrestling Noah was the company that helped us go to Japan. Right. I mean, we're going to Japan. We can't sell tickets. We got to help, they got to do it. So all those things. Plus, getting to be the producer of so many great shows, and having guys like Punk, Samoa Joe, Seth Rollins, Tyler, the Bucks, the list goes on and on. Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, Jay Lethal. Having these guys, the ones either that stayed or went on to do other things. I was watching WrestleMania a little. The best matches were the Ring of Honor guys.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
Cesaro. Yep. Here, help me out here. Cesaro wrestled.
Tyler Black.
Yeah. And,
right. And then
Steen and
Bryan
Generico.
Danielson was in a three-way.
Yeah. Steen and Generico were against each other?
Steen and Generico. Pure 100%. Ring of Honor.
Yeah, and
so,
I think
I wasn't best friends with everybody, but certain guys I had good relationships with. He might not like me saying this, but he don't care. Tyler Black used to be my roommate. Why? There was nothing nefarious. It was because he didn't drink, and at the time I wasn't drinking, so he didn't like to stay away from the rest of the partiers. I used to be roommates with the Bucks. Two nice Christian boys. They got me there. What the hell are they thinking? That was fine. Bucks have stayed at my house. I've stayed with them. Kyle O'Reilly was a close friend, but I wasn't there to be friends.
Of course not.
But, along the way, there's certain guys, Jay Lethal, one of my dearest friends. There's certain guys that, over the years, it's like, hello, goodbye. Even like Bryan Danielson, no bad blood. But you and I have talked longer in this conversation than I've ever spoken to. I mean, I'd be like, hey, what's up, man? Maybe that's not true. Like, hey, what's going on, Cary? But, so it's just the whole thing's been like a fantasy, a dream come true, a nightmare sometimes.
Is that where you're just mentioning?
I'm really glad.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead. I was just saying. I was just to say. I was just about to say. You just mentioned WrestleMania. I know, eh? It's our first time apparently. You just mentioned WrestleMania and some of those names that were on there. Do you take a sense of pride taking a look at events like WrestleMania and AEW and
Absolutely.
NXT and seeing it littered with Ring of Honor talent?
Littered. Like they're a bunch of the piles of shit.
Way to go, Tyler.
Of course I do. I'm very happy. Look, I learned early on, going back to Punk and Samoa Joe, that there's going to be attrition. You're going to lose guys. And yet that would open up space. So when we lost Punk and Samoa Joe, I forget the order, but within like 6 months of each other, that we're done. But that opened up room for guys like Austin Aries, Jamie Gibson, Tyler Black, Jimmy Jacobs, Chris Hero, Claudio Castagnoli. And then we would lose other guys. And then there was the famous night infamous in 2009 when we lost Brian and Nigel the very same night.
Yeah.
And they put a fork in us.
Fine.
And I was able to get hold of Jim Cornette, who just got fired from TNA, and have him come to New York. And we got hold of Homicide, former ROH champ, New York legend. He was away from Ring of Honor for about a year. So it was like a magic trick. We were losing Tyler and Brian, but Cornette and Homicide came in as a surprise. And that opened up room for guys like Davey Richards, Eddie Edmonds, Kyle O'Reilly, Adam Cole, Shelton Benjamin, Charlie Haas.
That's right.
I'm leaving out names here, but anyway, and you know, you got guys I leave out, like for example, Roderick Strong, the whole time, fucking guys, you know, MVP.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so this 500th show that we're celebrating is interesting because it's not my company. But it's the 500th Sinclair performance production of Ring of Honor. But it's still.
I'm glad you said that, because I was just about to say we'll always consider this to be Cary Silkin's thing. You know, we didn't grow up. I was an adult by the time ROH came around, but we watched from the beginning. I didn't watch from day one. When I came in, it was Cary Silkin's thing. When you guys sold over to Sinclair, it was still Cary Silkin's thing.
Did you guys ever go to any Toronto shows when I owned it?
Oh yeah.
Not when you owned it, unfortunately. Not myself. I've only gotten to go to one show, and unfortunately, it was just 2 years ago.
Okay.
I got to go to a couple. I was there the first one in Toronto with Steen and Nigel, which was spectacular.
That at that hockey rink?
At the Ted Reeves, the hottest arena in the planet. Holy shit.
Here, I'll give you a good curse. My uncle used to say, it's hotter than a nun's box. Which reminds me, if you want to hear nice quotes like that, as well as other stories of a very blue nature, check out the podcast I do with Ian Riccaboni, Last Stop Penn Station, where not only do we talk about Ring of Honor, but we talk about my life prior to Ring of Honor, hustling tickets as a ticket scalper on the streets of New York City, my years with, heavy drug use, alcohol, cocaine. I'm lucky I'm alive. And, rock and roll stories, getting a party with John Belushi and Rush.
That's right.
Other rock acts, and getting to go see all these great bands. I was there at the first Paul McCartney US tour when the Who did Quadrophenia, David Bowie, Diamond Dogs, Alice Cooper at the Garden, so on and so forth. Elton John, Billy Joel, we didn't care what it was. Grateful Dead, Jethro Tull. We went to everything, and I still do.
And for everyone listening, Cary, where can people find that?
They can find it anywhere. As long as if you put a fucking antenna on your arm, you can find it. Now we're on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, any of those platforms.
Yeah. Now I joined the party late. I only found out about this podcast when Ian told us about it a couple of weeks ago on the show. So I only started listening a couple of weeks ago. And I got to tell people, man, I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm not going to give any stories away because I want people to go and listen to this podcast. But your story about the wrestler and the whole Nick Cage stuff, oh my God, I'm dying, just dying listening to this stuff. People need to go and listen to this podcast right away.
Thank you.
Okay, while we're on the topic of Toronto, what are some of your memories of coming to Toronto?
Oh, I love Toronto. It's very loose there.
No, not right now.
No, I'm saying when I was going there, it's a very liberal city.
Yeah.
And I used to have a lot of fun. One of the guys I would hang out with is Bobby Cruz, the ring announcer. He's he likes that fun.
Well, I promise that we've got all the garbage cleaned up from the one year you guys came and we had the garbage strike.
We don't care. I'm used to New York. But yeah, Toronto, the city's great. The partying's great. What is that? Church Street?
Yeah.
And the other street, come on, the famous with a Y.
Like a Young Street.
Young Street.
Right. And yeah, it's just a good town. Just a good town. And the wrestling fans were great there.
Yeah.
We went there. The shows were good. I remember bringing Bret Hart up there once as a autograph guy, and
Flair was the next night. Yeah.
As far as Canada goes, I'm going to say Toronto is my second favorite city to watch wrestling in because the fans are great, but it doesn't beat Montreal. I lived in Montreal for 10 years. Wrestling fans in Montreal are fucking rabid.
They're rabid. I like St. Catherine Street too.
Oh yeah, St. Catherine.
I know
Street.
what you do.
I spent a week there one weekend. It's fantastic there.
Go.
Now I got to ask you, Cary, since you brought up ROH having the opportunity to go to places like Japan. Currently in ROH, we're seeing a great uprise in Mexican superstars, guys like Rush and guys like
Bandito,
you know, these guys are amazing. Is there any plans on ROH expanding out into Mexico?
Right now, we're trying to get out of Baltimore.
Yeah,
right, of course. Yeah,
you know, we're dealing with the same issues you guys are. I don't want to speak for Sinclair, but they're very cautious.
Of course.
Number one thing is safety for the wrestlers, for the fans. That's why we haven't done any shows in front of people. That's why we haven't left Maryland. But if things continue in the positive direction that they've been, we'll be doing some live shows. Maybe. And once again, I can't speak for them.
Of course.
Maybe by the end of the summer. Maybe.
Okay.
Cary, can we get you to talk a little bit about what it was like working with Gabe Pokolsky? Sorry, guys.
Gabe learned from Paul Heyman.
All right.
So Gabe was brilliant as far as his, I consider myself a producer. What does a producer do? They get the best, like you see in a movie, produced by whatever, Stanley Kubrick, right? Produced by Martin Scorsese. They get the best director, the best lighting people, the best, actors. So but Gabe learned from Paul, and Gabe was a hothead. He was very brilliant, but he liked to have he's famous for his hissy fits. It was just to be dramatic. It was entertaining almost. It became a thing like CM Punk and Colt Cabana, or CM Punk and Adam Pearce used to just wait and just stand there and watch. But him and I got along until I fired him.
Right.
And, and then he was like, why, whatever. So all these stories and all the details of this are available on the podcast.
There you
But
go.
overall, I'm very grateful to Gabe.
Something that really sets Ring of Honor apart from other companies is the pure title. Can you talk a little bit about the pure title, Cary?
No, it was sort of a, what do they, it was
Right.
it was like a bonus or something, and that was a
Oh,
Gabe
okay.
creation, so, and then it was retired with that pure title unification match. But to have it come back now or earlier in 2018 and starting the new Ring of Honor tapings with that tournament, I really think that distinguished us from the other on AEW. There's some nonsense. There's some good stuff on WWE. There's some nonsense. There's some good stuff on Ring of Honor. There's some nonsense. But the pure title is not nonsense. It was to establish pro wrestling like I like it, like we like it, and not to have any kind of gimmick matches.
When you bullshit. when Ring of Honor took that break during the beginning of the pandemic, coming back with the pure title tournament, I think was basically putting that flag in the ground saying, this is what we're doing, this is who we are, and it worked. Ring of Honor had the best product in 2020, and I have no problem saying that. And I'm not saying that because I'm in contact with you. I've said that on this show several times. Nobody beat Ring of Honor's in-ring or on television product in 2020, and they had almost a fraction of the television time as anybody else. And that's because I think of that pure title tournament and guys like Jonathan Gresham and Tracy Williams and these amazing young guys.
Amazing. Absolutely. Tracy Williams, you just mentioned like the two new MVPs. How about Rhett Titus has had a rebirth? Jay Lethal's always there.
Yeah.
Bandito, so on. But
even guys like Cheeseburger has really solidified himself as somebody because of the pure division.
But the pure title was a good, and that's all attributed to Delirious, our behind the scenes guy. It was a really good way to relaunch the product, and we're keeping it in the mix as we go along.
Well, that was the very last question I want to ask you, Cary. Who is, in your mind, and I'm not asking you to throw anybody under the bus or anything like that, I'm asking you who you think is one of the more important people behind the scenes right now. I think of Delirious right away, but who's really the I don't want to say the brains, but the passion behind ROH right now? Yeah,
Delirious is, but it's all the thing about Ring of Honor, whether it was Gabe and Cary, or Adam Pearce and Cary, or Delirious and Cary, it was the crew behind the scenes. It was always a family, pretty much a very good locker room. We had very few knuckleheads. Very few.
Which is a rarity in this.
I'll tell you one of them. The only guy that was a pain in the ass, Austin Aries.
I'm so happy.
Everyone knows that anyway. And if he was on here, he'd say, yeah, I am. But everybody worked as a team, and they knew I was struggling. Hero, Claudio, Cabana, everybody just dug in, and the proof is in what you see on the old tapes, the new tapes, the current product. And here we are with our 500th Sinclair show coming up, and it's really cool.
But I'm glad we got you now, because I can't think of anybody better to have on for our 500th ROH special